There is an idea that most of us grow up believing, even if no one ever says it out loud. The idea is that if you are kind, patient, cooperative, and understanding, things will eventually work out for you. People will notice your effort, appreciate your attitude, and reward you fairly. In a perfect world, that might be true. But in the real world, especially in competitive environments like careers, business, and organizations, that belief often leads to frustration, resentment, and burnout. Many people eventually reach a point where they look around and wonder why those who are more blunt, more demanding, and sometimes openly difficult seem to move ahead faster. They negotiate higher salaries, gain authority more quickly, and are less likely to be taken advantage of. This can feel deeply unfair, especially to people who pride themselves on being decent and considerate. But there is a psychological explanation for this pattern, and understanding it can completely change how you navigate your own life. To begin, we need to talk about personality differences and why some people are naturally more sensitive to conflict and negative emotion than others. Sensitivity to threat is not random. It exists for a reason. Historically speaking, the world has been a dangerous place, and not everyone faced the same level or type of risk. On average, women tend to be more sensitive to danger, punishment, and negative emotion than men. This is not a moral judgment or a weakness. It is an adaptation. For most of human history, women faced unique risks that men did not. Physical vulnerability played a role, but sexual danger was especially significant. The biological cost of sex has always been higher for women. An unwanted sexual encounter could lead to pregnancy, which in traditional societies often meant social exclusion, poverty, or dependence. Even in modern societies, the consequences are still serious and life-altering. Because of this, it made sense for women to develop a stronger internal alarm system. Being cautious, vigilant, and emotionally sensitive increased the chances of survival. Workplaces, institutions, and hierarchies do not operate like families. They reward performance, efficiency, and results. They often involve conflict, negotiation, and competition for limited resources. This is where differences between agreeable and disagreeable personalities become especially important. Agreeable people tend to be cooperative, compassionate, and polite. They value harmony and try to avoid conflict whenever possible. They are often good listeners and reliable team members. Disagreeable people, by contrast, are more direct, skeptical, and competitive. They are less concerned with preserving everyone's comfort and more focused on achieving specific outcomes. This does not automatically make them cruel or unethical. It means they are more willing to tolerate discomfort, including social tension, if it helps them reach their goals. One of the most important advantages disagreeable people have is that they are willing to say no. They refuse tasks they believe are unfair or unnecessary. They push back when expectations are unreasonable. They negotiate aggressively when resources or status are on the line. Agreeable people often struggle in these situations because saying no feels wrong to them. They worry about disappointing others, creating tension, or being perceived as selfish. To understand how this plays out in real life, consider what happens inside organizations. In almost every workplace, there are people who consistently work hard, take responsibility, and carry more than their share of the load. There are also people who do the minimum, avoid accountability, and rely on others to cover for them. Agreeable individuals tend to notice the personal struggles of underperformers and give them the benefit of the doubt. Disagreeable individuals tend to notice patterns of behavior and judge performance accordingly. This difference has consequences. When underperformance is tolerated for too long, it places additional strain on high performers. Those who work hard begin to feel that their effort is not valued, especially when they are treated the same as those who contribute very little. Over time, this erodes motivation and fairness. Disagreeable people are more willing to confront this problem directly, even if it means upsetting others or making unpopular decisions. There is another uncomfortable reality that many people eventually discover. Large organizations often depend heavily on the unpaid emotional and practical labor of agreeable people. These individuals smooth conflicts, take on extra tasks, and keep things running behind the scenes. They rarely ask for recognition or additional compensation, partly because doing so feels uncomfortable. As a result, they are often taken for granted. This pattern is especially common among people who are both agreeable and conscientious. They care deeply about doing a good job and about not letting others down. Unfortunately, this combination makes them easy to exploit. If you consistently take on more work without complaining, the system will assume you can handle it indefinitely. Over time, resentment builds, but the habit of accommodation makes it difficult to speak up. Many people who seek therapy are not aggressive. They are exhausted from being too agreeable. They feel overlooked, undervalued, and stretched thin. What they often need is not confidence in the traditional sense, but permission to prioritize their own needs without feeling guilty. They need to learn how to tolerate the discomfort that comes with setting boundaries. One of the biggest challenges agreeable people face is expressing thoughts that feel harsh or confrontational. They may recognize problems clearly, but hesitate to speak up because they fear hurting others or being judged. Over time, this silence becomes costly. Problems that are not addressed do not simply disappear. They accumulate and become harder to resolve. While avoiding conflict may create short-term peace, it often leads to long-term dissatisfaction. Disagreeable people tend to approach conflict differently. They see it as an inevitable part of life, rather than something to be avoided at all costs. This does not mean they enjoy hurting others, but they accept that tension is sometimes necessary to resolve issues. They are willing to have difficult conversations early before problems grow larger. Another key difference between agreeable and disagreeable individuals is clarity about desire. Disagreeable people usually know what they want and are comfortable pursuing it. Agreeable people, especially those who are highly accommodating, may lose touch with their own goals over time. They become skilled at responding to others' needs, but less practiced at identifying and asserting their own. This can be especially damaging in careers. Progress often requires advocating for yourself, asking for opportunities, and negotiating terms. Waiting quietly to be noticed rarely works. While being cooperative and kind makes you pleasant to work with, it does not automatically lead to advancement. Systems tend to reward those who make their value visible and insist on fair treatment. The point of all this is not to suggest that kindness is a mistake or that compassion should be abandoned. Society needs people who care, who support others, and who prioritize relationships. However, kindness without boundaries often leads to self-betrayal. The most effective people learn to combine empathy with firmness. They are capable of saying no, speaking honestly, and engaging in conflict when necessary. Disagreeable people tend to succeed not because they lack empathy, but because they are willing to endure discomfort in pursuit of reality. They do not avoid hard truths or difficult conversations. Learning to adopt some of these traits, even if they feel unnatural at first, can dramatically improve your ability to protect your time, energy, and dignity. Becoming more assertive does not mean becoming cruel. It means recognizing that your needs matter, that conflict is sometimes unavoidable, and that long-term respect is built through honesty rather than endless accommodation. When agreeable people learn to integrate strength into their personality, they often discover that they can be both kind and effective, and that combination is far more powerful than either trait alone. For people who are naturally agreeable, the idea of becoming more disagreeable can feel uncomfortable or even wrong. It can sound like a request to become selfish, harsh, or uncaring. That is not what is required, and it is not what works in practice. Becoming more disagreeable in a healthy way is not about changing who you are. It is about adding a skill you were never encouraged to develop. The first step is learning to pause before automatically saying yes. Highly agreeable people often agree out of habit rather than intention. They say yes to avoid discomfort, to keep things smooth, or because they assume their own needs can wait. A simple but powerful practice is to replace immediate agreement with a brief pause. Saying something like, "Let me think about that," creates space. It gives you time to check whether the request is reasonable and whether you actually want to accept it. This pause alone can dramatically reduce resentment. The second step is learning to state preferences clearly, even when they feel inconvenient. Many agreeable people speak indirectly, hoping others will pick up on hints or tone. Disagreeable people are usually more explicit. You do not need to be aggressive to be clear. Saying, "That doesn't work for me," or "I'm not comfortable with that," is not an attack. It is information. Clear communication prevents misunderstandings and builds long-term respect, even if it creates short-term tension. Another important practice is separating honesty from hostility. Telling the truth does not require emotional intensity. You can deliver firm messages in a calm, neutral tone. In fact, this is often more effective. When you remove apology from statements that are not actually wrong, you signal self-respect. Over-apologizing weakens your position and trains others to expect accommodation rather than negotiation. It is also useful to start small. You do not need to confront the most difficult person in your life right away. Practice disagreeing in low-risk situations, such as expressing a different opinion in a meeting or declining a minor request. These small acts build confidence and help your nervous system learn that disagreement does not automatically lead to catastrophe. Another key skill is learning to tolerate the emotional discomfort that comes after setting a boundary. Agreeable people often feel guilty even when they have done nothing wrong. This guilt does not mean you made a mistake. It is simply your nervous system reacting to unfamiliar behavior. If you can sit with that discomfort without immediately fixing it by over-explaining or backtracking, it will fade over time. Finally, it is important to remember that not everyone will like the more assertive version of you. Some people benefit from your compliance and will resist any change. This does not mean you are doing something wrong. In many cases, it means the relationship was built on an imbalance. Healthy relationships adjust. Unhealthy ones often rely on silence and self-sacrifice. Becoming more disagreeable in a healthy way means learning to protect your time, energy, and values while remaining fair and honest. It is not about dominating others, but about refusing to disappear. When agreeable people develop this capacity, they often find that they are taken more seriously, respected more consistently, and far less likely to feel resentful or exhausted. Over time, this balance between empathy and firmness allows them to succeed without losing their integrity. The choice is yours.